Hey everyone! Welcome to TRCOA's Behind the Groove. I am Kafir Gov. I teach the APT Advanced Pro Tools class here at TRCOA. Today we're going to discuss automation features in Pro Tools, plugin automation features. In general, we're going to discuss more, we're going to talk about automation in general. Why do we need it? What are the uses for it? We're going to see here how to use it, but also we're going to discuss some potential uses for it, when to use it, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and ask questions in the chat as we go along. Cool. All right. Hope all you guys out there are taking care of yourself and keeping safe during these very weird times, right? So let's kind of start and discuss in general automation. What is automation? Automation is basically stands for anything that we can automate in Pro Tools, any actions that we want to apply and change over time without having to keep, let's say for example, volume, right? Let's start with a simple one. Let's say I have a section of strings in a song, and whenever I get to the chorus of the song, I want them to become more prominent in the mix. And what that means is that, in theory, I want all the strings to just come up, let's say 2 dB in the mix, only for the chorus, and then drop back down to create this enhancement of dynamics in the song. Because they may work really well for the verse, but for the chorus they kind of get buried, and this is not a question of EQ, this is not a question of some other form of treatment. It's just a matter of, if they were playing live in a room, the strings would play a little bit stronger in order to create that effect of more intensity in the chorus. So that's a good example where I can actually automate the strings in the string section to just come up only for the choruses and then drop back down to the verses or the rest of the song. There are different ways and approaches to going about automation in Pro Tools. Some of them are more, I want to say, precise and surgical, and some of them are more intuitive and easier to feel out. And we're going to go over both of them. So let's maybe start with some simple stuff. In general, I'd say automation, the use of it is dynamics, is to create more focus on one thing versus another, giving certain instruments or certain parts more of a spotlight in specific moments in the song where they have room for it. Another example could be, I had this one song that I was working on that was very vocal focused like every other song. But then when you reach the C part section, it was all about a guitar riff. And the guitar riffs throughout the song were pretty consistent in the way that they were supposed and where they were supposed to be, but because you don't want them to overpower the vocals. But then whenever the vocals weren't there anymore and you had this C section where they could really shine, automation came into play to kind of put that riff as the front focus of that section. And once the vocals came back in, the guitars dropped back down, right? So let's just dive into it and see a little bit how we can automate stuff in Pro Tools. Let's start with, if you take a look here in my session, so I have here a session by an artist that's called Jason Ray and Jesus Cristo. Jason Ray is a local R&B, I want to say, hip-hop producer who is actually signed for management in South Korea. He's kind of famous over there and kind of like the K-pop thing. Kind of weird, but he's from here in Austin. He's very, very talented. This is the track that I mixed for them recently. Let's just take a listen for a second, you know, to the track just to get familiarized with what we're dealing with, okay? Here.
Love through the rush, quickly you flush. My heart's not crushed, I live through the pain. You made mine rain, my wish to the drain. I took it away, I lost my baby, my life turned to gray. Lost on my mind, threw it all in like if I was blind. I should've known, I should've left you alone. All of then I should've answered your phone. Who were you with when you home? That's the reason, decided, fuck it, I'm done. Fuck it, I'm done, fuck it, I'm done. My mind went crazy, vision went hazy, girl, you were driving me crazy. My mind went crazy, vision went hazy, girl, you were driving me crazy. I'm holding on to you, baby. I'm holding on to you. I'm holding on.
Cool. Well, you guys kind of get the idea of, you know, kind of what we're dealing with here. Let's discuss first things that, like the part that maybe some of you are more familiar with, which is kind of like the surgical way to operate automation. Whenever I go over here with my tracks in the edit window, I can pretty much change you know, the view of different aspects of the track. Usually we see it on, you know, as waveforms. We can see playlists. I don't really have playlists here, but you can also change this to volume, for example, or you can change it, you know, to mute or any kind of panning. And let's just open automate like the automation for volume here for a second, just so we could kind of see, just, you know, as an example with the volume, what we could do. If I click this little crayon button up here, right, you guys kind of see it over there, right? I can pretty much draw anything I want just by clicking on it. I can either click different points to create these little points and then kind of afterwards drag these little points to create movement and automation, right? Like for example, here we're dealing with a kick, and what I'm doing is basically, you know, raising the volume from minus 12.3 dB to 6.2 dB, right? And let's just listen to that real quick. So it's not just the click, not just the kick. Right, let's do something more aggressive with it just so we can really hear it. Right, so that's one way that you can go about it. You can even do some crazy things with this little crayon thing. You can literally create your own art of automation just by holding the click down and doing whatever you want with it, right? Boom, see? And it kind of creates this this weird Frankenstein of movements of volume in our case, right? And then afterwards, like, you can fix it or change it by kind of erasing some of these points. See, if I, like, for example, erase these 3 points here, now this point will lead directly to this point. Or if I cut out all of these points and I want the movement from this point to this other point to be more like a gradual, line, then I can just erase all these lines and boom, right? Cool, so that's one way that you can approach automation. And yeah, like, you can draw anything pretty much. You can go in here and, mute stuff by, once again, clicking this and kind of making your points and stuff, and then, dragging these things down. Like, for example, right now, basically I've muted this track only for this section, right? See? So these are, this is one way that you can approach automation in Pro Tools. If you want to be very surgical, these uses are pretty good when you want to do something very precise. Like, for example, I wanted to mute this part exactly from the one of this section, right? So it might be easier to do by drawing these things out and using my grid if I am on, on a proper tempo structure. I can be more precise about what I want to do and where I want to do it, right? So we've kind of seen automations here with muting and volume, and I could also do this with the pan left in this case, because I have this is basically a stereo track, so I can automate any of these to move however I like, and so on, right? If I'm set on pan left, then it's basically automating the left side. If I'm on pan right, it's automating the right side, and so on. These are different things that I can automate if I want to, right? So apart from drawing these things, you could also, remember earlier I mentioned like the section of strings, or I mentioned the guitars. There's also a more intuitive way to do this, and I personally like to use that better. And the way that you can intuitively kind of feel out automation, right? Because it's like dynamics, it's like playing an instrument. You play the drums and you want to get more loud, you play louder, right? You want to get less loud, right? You play more quietly, right? So basically, Pro Tools allows you also to use your faders and different aspects of the fader in the mix window to be able to feel out the automation, meaning you can literally move the fader and record the automation while you're doing it. Let me double check that we don't have any questions for the time being. Cool. All right. Cool. So let's take an example. The automation aspect in the mix window is controlled over here in this little box, which is, or drop folder if you want, which is this drop menu under Auto. Well, makes sense, right? Auto for automation. So if I click on this drop down menu, all these different pieces of options for automations basically open up for me. Now, today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of discuss a few of these and kind of understand what they're for and their uses and how they work. First off, let's start with the fact that automation in Pro Tools actually, its default would be automation read. And why is it on read as a default? Because basically this read means that Pro Tools is reading whatever automation is already in there, right? Like for example, the volume, right now there's no automation, but let's say I did draw automation, right? Let's say there was some automation. So whenever it's on read, it's just gonna read from the automation that already exists here, right? That kind of clear? So that's why that's the default of it. Let's say you had all this different automation here. Let's say I created this, insanity here for a second, something very creative, right? Let's do it more intense just so you could really see that movement happen. And I'm gonna play it back, right? Right now it's on read, so right? It's basically reading the automation that exists. But if I put this on off, now it's not gonna read any automation. It's basically just gonna play it as is. Right? You see this line here that basically shows us, basically this here controls the overall automation right now. The level that the fader was on is just gonna stay the same, the automation is off. Right? Pretty easy to understand. Automation read, automation off. These are fairly easy, right? I'm gonna put it back on read here for a second, and I'm gonna cancel our beautiful creation, right? And now I'm gonna talk about this other aspect that's called touch, latch, and write. These three options are very important to know about. I personally love the touch feature the most, and whenever I do use automation, that's probably the one that will be my go-to, and I'll explain in a second why. But let's see how that one works. You'll see that the second that I put it on touch, we have this kind of like highlighted automation, like this box just became lit up, right? That just means that automation is triggered. And when I'm on auto touch, basically anytime I touch anything in this fader here, or any of these send faders, or within the plugins, and we'll get to the plugins in a second, all of these aspects can be automated whenever I touch something. So when it is on the touch feature, as long as I click my mouse and I make any movement while touching, it'll basically record the automation that I am applying. Now, the second I leave my mouse and the playback shuts off, that's where automation will stop recording. Let's just take a look for a second, right? So right now, we're looking at this volume, right? Let's make that kind of simple. We're seeing this volume right now. There's no automation on it. We kind of, turned that off, erased all the automation that we had before. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit play. And as long as I hit play and I haven't touched anything, no automation is being recorded. But the second I will move anything here, anywhere, we'll see that automation will be recorded. So let me just hit the play button and record some automation. All right, let's see. You see that the second I clicked on it, it became red, the auto touch. Can you see that? Right? That means that it is recording. Now, I haven't moved anything yet, right? So it didn't really record anything, but let's do that again. And now I'm gonna move the fader. See all this stuff that I'm doing right now? And I let it go, and let's see the automation that I created, right? So pretty much just like earlier, I did it from here, right, by drawing it. This time, I basically let Pro Tools record the automation that I played, right? If you think about it, it's almost like playing an instrument. I was feeling out the fader and it recorded it. And why is this? Let's take some other examples. I know I did it with a volume. Let's now test it out like with a panning, for example. Let's take this right pan knob. Once again, I'll hit play. And the second I touch it, boom. Right? And let's see what happened. Here we can see the volume, but if I go to pan right, boom, again, my amazing creation, right? Right, so I'm doing kind of like extreme measures right now, but this is kind of how it works in terms of how you record the automation. And you can pretty much record anything if you want to mute something, right? For example, you see how I clicked the mute, brought it back into life, muted again, brought it back into life, and boom. Let's go to the mute now, and boom, you can see the automation that I created, right? So most of the time when I'm dealing with automation and I'm trying to do these kind of things, I'll probably use these features like the touch feature to do this. But then if I have to be more precise, like for example, let's say I wanted the mute to happen right at the beginning of this, that was my intention, to, you know, cut off the loop right on the 1, then I'd go back here, move it to the 1, you know, and go back here, move this to the 1, and so on, right? So on one hand, I can kind of feel it out by using the actual mute button here and the auto touch feature. But then if I have to you know, surgically make sure that it is starting at the right time and cutting off at the right, you know, at the exact moment that I want it to, I can always go back and fix it with the drawing. But there's something about just doing it intuitively that is easier to just, okay, let me just do it real quick, right? Like for example, right, which is easier, and then go back here and fix it versus going in here, having to click this, then do another one, and then do another one, and then go back to this and drag this one down, right? And put, like, sometimes it's just easier to do that on the fly and kind of feel it out, especially when it comes to volume. When you want something to come up for a certain part and then drop back down slightly, it's a lot easier to kind of feel it out by, you know, remember those strings that I was mentioning earlier? Let me give you an example here in this song, right? Let me kind of erase all of this for a second. Right, so I'm kind of erasing the amazing automation that we created just so we can kind of see how that works. Pan right, I already erased you, great. And let's put this back on waveform and let's listen to the song. Like, let's take a very real example, right? Let's say I feel, you know what, those backing tracks. By the way, whenever you're done with your automation, you actually want to put it back on read, because you don't want later in the mix to accidentally touch something that was recorded that you didn't mean for it to happen. And then you're like, oh, wait, what happened to my track there? It disappeared. Or it got muted and I didn't mean for that. I just muted it because I was trying to focus on something else in the mix, but I didn't realize that it was actually recording the automation, right? So just whenever you're done with your automation, just move it back to read to be safe. But let's take a real example from this, right? You can hear those backing vocals, right? Where are they? Let's see. So here, for example, at the beginning, they're like prominent. They are the core focus of this intro. They're part of what makes it kind of interesting and different from other songs. So I wanted to really bring them up. Now, later in the song, when there's the other vocals, they might start to interfere. In my mix here, what I did to solve the problem was that I took pieces of it and kind of moved it to different tracks, right? And you can see here in these tracks, right? I basically took this same track is at the beginning, it was the stereo track, and then I took pieces of it and some of it put on the left, some of them put it on the right, and played around with that. Instead of doing the automation on it, because it was easier to do that as a function. But let's say, for example, I actually wanted these vocals to be less prominent than you know, in other, you know, let's say in a certain part of the song, right? Like maybe here, right? Whenever the rap comes in. Maybe I want them to be even a little bit more in the background. So just to keep the focus on the main rapper. So we're talking about these two tracks. Right now they're grouped together. I'm going to cancel their group and I'm going to create a group only for these two, the ad-libs. Let me see if I already have one. Yeah, I actually already have. No, I don't have one. So we're just going to cancel this group. We're going to create a new group. To create the group, right, we hit Command G, right? Boom, and we're gonna call these ad-lib background vocals. Okay, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how you can use the touch feature. Because they're grouped together, whenever I move it to auto touch, see both of them are on this, are basically active together in the automation. They're linked together. So let me kind of play it out, and then whenever I get to that verse, I'm gonna bring them down a little bit just for the verse. And what I like about the touch feature is that once I let go of holding the mouse down and clicking on it, the faders will jump right back to where they were, which makes it really easy for me. Like I don't have to automate it, you know, 2 dB down and then bring it precisely 2 dB up to where they were originally. All I have to do is just let go of the mouse. So kind of like, let's see how that works. Basically from the verse where the rap comes in, I'm gonna bring them down 2 dB. So I'll start playing it a little bit before and I'm gonna feel it out. Okay, let's see. Alright, clicking down, and not yet. Alright, we're waiting for that to start. And 1, 2, 3, and
love through the rush, quickly you flush. My heart's not crushed. I live through the pain. You made mine rain. My wish to the drain. I took it away. I lost my baby. My life turned gray. Lost on my mind. Threw it all in like if I was blind. I should have known. I should have left you alone. All of then I should have answered your phone. Who were you with? Were you home? That's the reason. Decided. Fuck it, I'm done. Fuck it, I'm done. Fuck it, I'm done. My mind went crazy, vision went hazy, girl, you
and we're getting close to the hook.
My mind went crazy, vision
and
went
1,
hazy,
2, 3. By letting go, it just goes directly back to where it was. And now I can kind of click the space bar to stop the playback. And let's take a look now, right? If I move to volume, you can see the automation that I created. Right? You can kind of see how it dropped from -7 to -8.3. And I did that while I was listening to it. So I was kind of feeling it out, knowing just intuitively, I put it at -8.3 because it sounded good to me. Not because, you know, if I had to draw this, for example, so maybe at first I would put it at -8 or minus, you know, 8.5 or -9, or maybe I had to listen to it one way and it wasn't exactly the way I wanted to, so I would have to come back here and then readjust it a little bit, bring it back down, and like it's a lot easier to kind of intuitively feel it out, right? Almost like I'm playing the instrument of these backing vocals and bringing down and feeling them out in, you know, the way that they need to be in the song. Right? I'm gonna double check again that we don't have any interesting questions. Not yet. Cool. All right. Awesome. So that's an example of, right, when you want to use that, and it's a lot easier to do that than it is to kind of start drawing and guessing at what volume it should have been, you know, and kind of spend, you know, more time than you have to instead of just feeling it out. So we kind of understand how the touch feature works, right? So let's kind of discuss the other two, and I'll explain through that why I like the touch feature more than the others. The difference between touch and latch is that latch, basically, you remember when I, you know, when I unclicked my mouse, the fader went back to its original volume before I started recording automation, which is a really nice feature. The latch actually does, it starts the same way as the touch function, in terms of whenever you actually touch the mouse, that's when it starts to record automation. But once you're done and you let your mouse go, as long as the playback continues to play, it is still recording automation from wherever you last left it, no matter if you if you unclicked your mouse, if you're touching it or not. So for example, right, let's take an example right here. We saw how the second I unclicked the mouse, it jumped back to the original volume, right? So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna recreate this automation here, okay? Let me kind of erase all this automation, and let's do it again with the latch, and you'll see what will happen. Whenever I let this go, it'll stay wherever it was, okay? So here we go. And 1, 2, 3, and
love through the rush, quickly you flush. My heart's not crushed. I live through the pain. You made mine rain. My wish through the drain. I took it away.
See, I'm still holding it down, and now I'm letting go. I let go. But you see the faders are still where they're at.
That's the reason decided, fuck it, I'm done.
So it kept the faders exactly where they were, instead of the touch function where those faders jumped right back to where they were originally before the automation. Obviously, you know, there are uses for both of them. Honestly, I personally like the touch feature because worst case scenario for me, let me kind of cancel this and do that with the touch again. Right, let's say I wanted the whole song to you know, that whole part to drop that dB.5 for the rest of the song. So what I would do is I would actually use the touch feature, right? And do it one more time. And 1, 2, 3, and right, I'm still holding it down, Now I released it, but I intended it to go for the rest of the song. So I don't mind. I'll just go ahead and erase these 2 points of the automation going back up, and I hit delete, and boom, it just stays at the same level as it was before for the rest of the song, unless I change anything else further down the line. So, you know, I probably have to do the same thing with the latch anyway, because unless I am willing to sit and let the playback play all the way throughout the song for it to record it, it would just stop at a certain point, and then once I stop the playback, it will come back to where it was. So I would have to do that anyway. But it's just good to know that you have those two options. That's the main difference between touch and latch. Now let's take an example of, let's do something else. Let's leave volume out of the way, all right? Let's say, for example, you see I have here a reverb that this send effect is basically over here. And let's just listen to it real quick. So these are my tracks dry. Yeah, just let's listen to that. You can hear what they sound like when they are dry. And this is the reverb for it, right? So let's say I decided that I wanted my reverb to become more prominent only in that section of the song. Instead of bringing down the vocals to make them sit behind the main rapping voice, right? I could actually do something else. I could enhance the reverb, hence throw them backwards in the ambience, make them further away from, you know, the near field kind of, like instead of hearing it very up front in the mix, they'll go way more back to the background. And as a result, that's another way for me to put focus on the main vocals. So how would I do that? I can go into any of these. When this is on auto, I can go to any of these over here, and I can play with these faders too. Now, this is basically the reverb track send. So if I bring this up, we're gonna hear more reverb. I can do it from here, or vice versa. I could put these on read, put this on auto, right? And then just raise the volume of the reverb. But in my case, this reverb may be actually at the same time be applied to maybe a different vocals. Maybe it also applies to the main vocals, the rapping vocals. So I don't want the reverb to come up in general on all the different tracks right now. I just want them to come up to be more prominent on these two tracks. So I would prefer to actually do it from here. And this will give us a good opportunity to kind of get a more visual, like we could see in real time how the automation applies, right? Let me actually put this guy over here for a second, and we'll put these on touch, and let's take a look at this guy as well. We got both of them here, right? Hold on. All right, we got both of these guys over here. They're both on auto touch. And to take a look right at what we're actually changing, remember I'm changing the reverb send track volume. So I'm gonna go over here down to lead vocals verb, and I'm changing the level of it. So as you can see, these are being represented by these lines, right? Right now there's no automation on it, no doubt, right? And we're gonna see in real time how they change when I, in touch motion, play with them, okay? So I'm gonna raise the reverb only on those guys. Let's see how that works. Sorry, let's go out of solo here. This is also in solo. There we go. Okay.
Holding on to you, baby. I'm holding on to you. Love through the rush, quickly you flush. My heart's not crushed, I live through the pain. You made mine rain, my wish to the drain. Tried to get away, I lost my baby. My life turned gray, lost on my mind. Threw it all in like if I was blind. I should've known, I should've left you alone. Older than I should've answered your phone. Who were you with when you home? That's the reason decided, fuck it, I'm done. Fuck it, I'm done. Fuck it, I'm done. My mind went crazy, vision went hazy, girl, you were driving me crazy. My mind went crazy, vision went hazy, girl, you were driving me crazy.
Drop. Okay, so technically we basically did it with one. We could link them together to do it at once, but what you guys were able to see at real time is the change in the writing of the automation of this specific track. Okay, so let's kind of erase that and do that one more time and see. I'll let go of the touch earlier and you'll be able to see how it basically stops recording automation and drops back down in the touch feature.
Love to the rush, quickly you flush, my heart's not crushed, I look through the pain, you made my
and I'll let it go. It drops down. Are you able to see this down here? And then once again, bring it up. You see what I mean? Now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go and change this to latch, and let's see what happens when I do that. Okay, so we said in latch it will not jump back down once I let it go. It will just continue at the same levels as I leave them, as long as I continue to let the playback roll. So let's see. I left it. I'm not touching right now the mouse. As you can see, it's still at the same level, and the second that I stop it, it goes, as long as the playback continues, it'll stay wherever it was and continue to record the automation from that point on. Is that kind of clear? You guys see the difference? Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna show you what write does. So, what write does, and this is kind of the main reason why I don't like to use it, is that the second I hit the playback, it's already recording automation. And it's a little tricky because it creates a situation where anything I touch while this happens, or anything that was on there before, let's say I did have automation before on like the panner, so it will basically write over the automation that's already there from the second I'll use the playback. This kind of forces us actually to go up here to automation. You can hit Command 4, right, to open this up, and then everything is enabled in default. But let's say, for example, I didn't want the automation to be enabled. I would have to come here, click that in write motion for it not to record over panning automation that I already had there when I'm in write mode. The reason I really like the touch feature is that only whatever I touch, and as long as I touch it, is actually being recorded, and I'm aware of it. I'm not overwriting any automation that I already had that I didn't intend to, as an example, right? So let's kind of see, right, we're gonna put it on auto write, and we'll see how that works.
Love to the rush, quickly you flush, my heart's not crushed, I live through the pain, you made my rain, my wish to the drain, I took it away, I lost my baby, my life turned
right, you can see the red line writing over.
Like if I was blind, I should have known, I should have left you alone, other than I should have answered your phone, who were you with when you home? That's the
right, so from the very beginning, it's basically recording automation and impacting whatever I do to it, which is not ideal to me, just because I may not be aware that it's recording over other stuff, because it's not only writing whatever I'm touching, it's also writing automation for the pan, it's writing automation for other stuff, anything that's enabled in automation in the default. And it's kind of a hassle for me to have to go disable a certain automation, and then once again then write the automation only for that. It just gets kind of taxing and not very intuitive for me. it's more of a hassle and could create more problems than it really helps. Now you can also see that the second I hit, I hit the space bar to stop the playback, even though this was on write, it automatically went back to latch. The reason they do that is in order for you, because what will happen is, let's say this was on right now, as long as I don't touch it, it's not going to record automation, right? It's going to just play back whatever I recorded. But if this is on write, it'll basically record over the automation that I had, right? You see that? And that can be very, very frustrating, because I, for example, just wanted to listen back to the automation that I recorded. And if it was on write again, it would record over the automation. Basically, it will play me back something that without the automation that I just recorded. So I think you guys get it. That's the main reason why I kind of prefer to use the latch and touch features. They're just, you know, easier to use, and they're very intuitive, and I don't have to worry that I erased something that I did not intend to, or that I recorded automation that I did not intend to. Let's see, double checking. Well, yeah, I see. So we're getting some questions here. So why don't we answer a few of these? So Corey asked, do you just hold on to it with the mouse for the touch feature, or did I see you pushing shift as well? No pushing shift. You don't have to basically touch anything apart from whatever you want to change. That's basically the only thing. If you're trying to record automation, as long as you're in touch mode or latch mode or write mode, you're in automation enable mode, then you can basically just anything you touch on that fader will be recorded. You don't have to hit any other key or anything like that. Let's see, what else is going on here? You can hold command to have smaller increments. Yes, that's a good one, right? If you're having a hard time, like you want to move smaller increments, you can hold the command key while you're doing the automation, and then it'll move in smaller increments, okay? So yeah, we have here a very important question. So Matthew Williams is asking, what's my cat's name? I think like that is something that I'm not going to answer here in the live chat, so to show that you guys actually have seen this seminar. So yeah, her name is Suki, so just remember that, okay? This might be important. And okay, Matthew, that question is, Matthew is asking, what's Ben's grandmother's name? All right, Matthew, that's a question for Ben. All right, moving on. So we kind of understand the differences between the touch, latch, and write options, right? You can think of different uses for them. Like I said, I personally like the touch feature. It's just very intuitive, easy for me to use. It's basically based on the faders in real automation for the big boards. And, you know, it's like you have a fader and you're just moving it up and down and kind of feeling the song as the way that it feels, right? Because we can, as mixers, as producers, as writers, music is about how it sounds, right? That's a big portion of it, but it is also very much about how it feels. And dynamics really play a big role in improving the how it feels in certain parts of songs, wherever something needs to come up in order to create more of an impact in that section of the song. So that is the main use for automation. So, okay, so we kind of understand by now how to use automation either by drawing it or either by automating it using these features over here. I'm going to put it back on read and I'm going to close these down. Now, let's talk about plugins automations, right? How do I automate plugins in Pro Tools? So when you go into any plugin in Pro Tools, right? Right here we have Pro Q3 by FabFilter, right? And you can see how this is an EQ basically, right? All I have here is a low cut at 147 Hertz, but ProQ has different aspects of features in it, right? I mean, I can, move the frequency, I can move, I can change bells, I can change the Q of them, I can change their, how loud they are, how low they are, right? All these different things can be automated, right? But how do I do it? And how do I know, how do I tell ProQ to automate a specific thing instead of, automating more than one thing at once or so on and so on. So if you can see right here, right next to your bypass button, right, and under auto, which again, auto stands for automation, right, you have these two little boxes. If you click on them, right, if I hover over it, it says plugin automation enable. So if you click on it, it basically opens up all the features in this plugin that you can potentially automate. Quite a lot of stuff going on here, right? Anything from, let's say you want to bypass the whole plugin just for a certain section. You could, by clicking on it, moving it here, and now anything that's going to be inside this section of the plugin automation, anything that moved from the left to the right will now be triggered for automation once I hit OK when I'm using touch, when I'm using, latch, when I'm using any automation mode, and so on and so on. So let's just do something crazy here for a second. You know what? Let's start with a bypass. Bypass is an easy one, right? Now let me hit OK here for a second. Basically what this means is right now I can automate this button to do whatever I want it to do, to turn on and off whenever I need it to to do that, right? So let's see, we're talking about this specific vocal here right now, and let's just see how that works. I'm gonna put this guy back on. Let me cancel the group here for a second. And we're talking about this guy. I'm gonna put this on touch, right? And I'm gonna play the playback. And you'll see that the second I hit the bypass button, because it is on auto touch and because I moved it to the right column, which makes it enabled now, it'll basically record the automation for it. All right, so let's hit the space bar and hit the... just a second here. Doesn't look like it recorded it. Let me try it again here for a second. Let's do it again. Turn this off for a second. Go here. Oh, sorry. It was a wrong bypass. This is the master bypass. I guess it was some other bypass. All right, so, let's try it again. Put it on auto touch and let's see how it changed its color here, right? Because now it's triggered for automation. All right, so let's see. And I'll click on it. Yeah, let me just put this on something. And meanwhile, just so we can kind of see that it's actually working. Right, let's do something aggressive here for a second, something like that. Focus on this track. And it's recording. Right? Now, let's see, I want to see back over here the automation that I just created. Because I moved this to this column, right, and it's enabled now, when I click on this, all of a sudden, I have this down here that didn't exist before. FabFilter Master Bypass. And you can pretty much see the automation that I just recorded. And once again, let's say I recorded the automation and felt it out and it worked cool for me, but I actually intended not to cut this completely. I can go back here and kind of readjust it pretty easily. Those are the parts that I wanted to apply, you know, hypothetically, the bypass to. So as you can see, once you put this over here in this column, let's say the frequency, for example, we're talking about the frequency of band 1. This is band 1, right? If I had another band here, this would be now band 2, right? You see? So I'm actually automating frequency band 1. If I wanted to automate frequency band 2, I would have to take this one and move this guy over here, right? But let's remove him back. Let's focus on this guy. And let's see now if I... Okay, sorry, I did okay. And you'll see the second I put it in, I moved it to the enabled column, now band 1 frequency opened up, which wasn't there before, right? Which now represents the automation that I'm gonna record for this. So this is band 1, I'm gonna record the automation for it. Let's kind of see what happens. Right, you see me drawing some cool stuff there. Right, and the second I let it go, it went back to where it started, right? Because we're in the touch mode, right? So this is basically what I created here. Some weird Frankenstein movement of the frequency, but I was able to automate it. I can move it wherever I want. Now, maybe let's actually see a good usage for these things, right? Let's take a good example. I'm going to erase all of that, right? And let me pull this out of the automation here. Let's put them back. We don't really need that. Yeah, remove. That's all good. Okay. And let me just put this back to where it was. 147, I believe. Doesn't matter, that's good enough. Back on. Cool. Take this out of touch, right? Because I'm done with it. I don't want it to continue recording. Let's put this guy back on waveform. And let's take an extreme example of something that you can do, right? Let's see, what do we have here? We have like this maybe loop, right? So let's kind of listen to it for a second. Right, and let's say I want to automate it in a way that will actually make it sound, you know, very thin in certain places and then, you know, less thin in others. Maybe I want to do like a radio effect on it. So to do that, what I would do is maybe, you know, put another Pro Q here and I'll cut all the low frequencies and the high frequencies, right? So I'll keep only the mid-range of it and let's see what that sounds like. Not a notch, high cut, pretty aggressive high cut, right? Maybe something like that. Let's see what that sounds like. right? You guys kind of get the idea, right? So what I want to automate is maybe a certain part in the song where that applies only to that section. So a good way to do it is, right, once I set the parameters of, you know, my high cut and my low cut, I can go ahead and automate the master bypass. That's all I need, because I don't want this to impact in certain parts, but then just impact at a certain part, right? So I'll first put it on bypass, right? And then I'll hit auto touch, right? And now let's listen to the song. Right, and I'll wait for the moment. Right. Wait for it. And 1, 2. Right, and right now I'm recording it. And now when the song will come back in, I'll cancel it, so it comes in with full power. And we can come in, 1, 2, 3, and oh, not yet, sorry, but that's okay. Right, and I can actually see what I'm recording right now down here. Right now it's bypassed. So turn it off, and I can see basically the bypass that I just automated. If I want to be more precise, I can now kind of fix the dots to start exactly where they should start, right? This doesn't really matter in this case because it actually starts only here, but this is just an example of how you can surgically adjust whatever you were just working on, right? Let's see if you guys have any questions in this regard. Cool. No questions so far. All right. So this is a good example of, you know, how you can use automation in a creative way when you want to do that, right? Let's take another example. How many of you are into Drake? Can't hear it, but is there anybody still out there who likes Drake? Probably. So Drake's producer, who calls himself 40, like the name, like the number 40, has become famous for a production trick that he uses that basically creates this vibe of like an underwater sound. And the way that he does it is he basically automates for certain parts of the songs that are meant to sound underwater by degrading the sample rate of the overall beat. And the reason he does that is when you degrade the sample rate, the first thing that you lose are the high frequencies. And the quality. So it kind of sounds like a high cut, a very aggressive high cut. You could do that effect that way, but he actually does it by degrading the sample rate. And let's see an example of, you know, how that will work, right? A good plugin to imitate whatever he's doing, you know, in order to degrade the sample rate. In Pro Tools, Pro Tools actually has a plugin, a harmonic plugin under harmonics that's called Lo-Fi. You probably have messed around with Lo-Fi before. It's a really cool saturator distortion. I love it for different applications. It comes with Pro Tools, so it's not like any special plugin. And you probably did not know that it can do that. So let's just open this plugin real quick. Let's see, we got it over here. This is lo-fi under harmonic, right? And boom, you see, I mean, you guys probably have seen the distortion and you've seen saturation. You've probably used it before many times, but you can actually bring down the quality of the track by degrading sample rates. And as you can see, when it's off, it's not making any impact. But the second you trigger it in, you kind of see, it kind of tells you which frequencies are kind of being affected by it first, right? The lower you go, the less frequencies you're going to hear. The higher you go, basically it eventually turns off completely. But here it barely affects anything, and then it cuts more high frequencies and more and more and more, and as you go down, right? So let's say I want to automate that just for a specific part in the song. Let's say that part that we were listening to just now, like that C section. So I'll go to sample rate and I'll add it over here, right? And I'll hit OK. And to feel it out, I'm actually going to do that on the main master fader. And I'm actually going to do it on yours because this is what you guys are listening to. I have another master fader here to be able to listen to the playback here. And just so you guys would be able to hear it, I'm going to put the master fader on touch. All right. And let's see how that works, right? Before I automate it, let's just listen to what it sounds like, right? Let me do it also here so I could hear it as well. Right, you guys can kind of hear the effect. The more, yeah, let me do it on the other one so you guys could hear it. Right, the more I open this, the less I use it. You can hear everything, right? Then if I bring it down a little bit, it's gonna cut a little bit of information. And the more I bring it down, the less high frequencies I'm gonna hear, right? So what I wanna do now is I actually wanna automate it, right? So once again, we went here, we go to the automation. Let's put this at 0, right, at off. And I put it over here, right? I moved the sample rate to the right column for it to be enabled in automation. I'm gonna put this on touch, and I'll make sure that it happens only for that section, right? So I'll start a little bit before. And this is where it actually comes in, right? So remember, the second I put it in enabled, all of a sudden I actually have it, because this, before this is enabled, it didn't exist here. But now we can kind of see what I'm recording, right? And let's see how this works. Here we go. Ooh, baby, I'm holding on to you. And as long as I'm holding it down, right, it's recording automation because I am in touch mode. And as long as the playback continues to play. I'm holding on to you. Right, I let it go and it went back up. Right, and now I can kind of see the creation that I've done here, and let me be more surgical about it. Let me actually, I have to kind of copy this over here for me to be able to hear what you guys are hearing. Then hold on. All right, so let's kind of listen to that. Here we go. right? And let's say I wanted to be very precise with this, so I can go back in here and kind of maybe let me get out of grid mode just so I could kind of like erase some of these guys. And let me put this right at the beginning. Let's put this at, where did I put it eventually? I put it at 6,300 hertz, right? So I'll take this guy, put this guy at 6,300 hertz. Then I can kind of erase all of these guys, erase these guys, and make sure that it ends right at the wherever I wanted it to end, right? Maybe put this guy exactly at 0, at off, put this guy at 63 hertz, right? Erase this guy, erase these guys, and now it should be pretty on point. Okay, let me copy this over here so I could hear also what I just did. Yes, I know I'm writing over the automation that was already there. Cool, and let's listen to it. Right, and you can kind of fine tune it by, you know, moving it here a little bit, back and forth, or playing around with these, just to make sure that the automation really does start where it needs to start and so on, and that it feels natural. But sometimes, you know, as you're listening to stuff and you're using the touch function, you can really, you know, feel it out and play it the way that you want, which may sound more natural than having to play around with these dots until they're exactly the way that they need to be. Okay? Cool. Right, so let's take another example of how to do this, you know, this effect, right? If I did not use lo-fi, I could also use, if I did not want to bring the sample rate down and I wanted to do this with just a simple EQ, yeah, I'm going to remove all the automation. See, every time I want to basically get rid of a plugin here that has automation on it, Pro Tools is going to be letting me know that it has automation on it before I actually erase it. So let's go ahead and bring in here an EQ. Let's take Pro Q, for example, and let's do a simple technique of a high cut, or if you want, low pass filter sweep that will basically give us the effect of things opening up, right? Like, for example, let's listen to what this does. Right now, we're hearing the full spectrum of our frequencies. I'm holding on to you. Right, and as I do this, right, now we hear only subs, and boom, we open this up, blah, 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 right? And let's say I wanted to record something like this. So once again, we're talking about band 1, right? The only thing that I'm changing really is the frequency. I could also change the gain if I played around with that and if I wanted to record that, but I don't. So I'll go here and band 1 frequency, add over here, and it's already on touch over here, right? I have to put it on touch, and let's see how that works. I'm holding on to you. And the second I let it go, boom, it opens up, right? Now I'm gonna drop this over here real quick so I could also hear what I did. Let's kind of listen back to it. I'm holding on to you. Right, and the plugin is alive. It's actually doing weird things here and moving around and right? And so that's the benefits of automation. So you can create kind of like that underwater effect also by using just, low pass, high cut filter sweep, or just, erase all the frequencies. Remember that when we degraded the sample rate, it said 6300, right? 6K, 6.3K. It's basically trying to tell you, oh, it's as if we're cutting all the frequencies up to 6300, right? So here I'm just taking an actual filter EQ and cutting everything to a certain point. But you will notice that it doesn't sound exactly the same when you degrade the sample rate. It actually has kind of like a distortion effect to it. It sounds a little different because you're actually degrading the quality of the music versus an EQ, which is just cutting all the high frequencies, right? So let's see an example of how I would use like this kind of effect. And remember, once again, because I put it in automation, now you see FabFilter Pro Q3 is here, and you can pretty much see what I did here, right, with what I recorded, the automation that I recorded. Right, I'm gonna erase this, and I'm gonna go back to the beginning of the song, and I'll show you like an example of how I might use it. Like for a song like this, if I wanted to do like some cool production intro to the song, even though this one doesn't need it, this song really has its own cool production intro value regardless. But what I'll do is I put it on touch. We already have our band 1 frequency over here. And what I'll do is I'll do like a high cut sweep that will kind of introduce the song coming in. Let's see kind of what that feels like. So I went back to the beginning of the song, right? And I'm gonna record the automation of this filter just for the intro, just to try and make it, kind of cooler, kind of like an EDM effect. Let's see what that sounds like. Right, I wasn't able to really hear that, so let me just put this back over here so I can hear what I did. Let's see. Cool, right? And now let's say I want to perfect it. It's not too easy with this specific mouse to really control that in real time. So I'll turn it back to read, and I'll take a look at the actual automation that I recorded, right? And you can see how this basically, if I click on this dot, it'll tell me which frequency I started from, 98 Hertz, which went all the way up to 28,000 or 30,000 whenever I opened it completely. But let's say I wanted this to feel like a very gradual line. So I'll just erase all these dots in the middle and create a straight line, and let's see what that sounds like. And once I'm done with this, I basically don't want it to fall back to where it was. I just wanted to keep and stay open. So I'll erase all these dots and keep the rest of the song unfiltered. So let's kind of listen to that. Now you can see a gradual climb. Right, just as an example, that's, creative idea that you could do with songs, sometimes. It's a pretty cool trick, but this is how you automate it to get it exactly the way, to get it to function and play the way that you want it to, okay? Cool, let's see if we have any other final questions here. No more questions, cool, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for watching. If you are enrolled, please go to the seminars tab on the MyTRCOA website and take the quiz over tonight's lesson. If you need to book one-on-one time with me to answer questions, please send me an email or a text and I can schedule a time with you. If you aren't enrolled, go to trcoa.edu to find out more information. Thanks for joining, and please also post in the chat subjects you'd like to see for our upcoming live streams. And as always, subscribe to our channel and we'll see you all next time. Thanks a lot.